Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited to bring you here today. I'm interviewing Gwendoline Van Doosselaere. She is the founder of Artemis Divorce Coaching, where she offers the education and support she wishes she'd had during her own multi-year, six-figure divorce. A former communications strategist for systemic change, Gwendoline now brings that lens to the deeply personal terrain of divorce, helping women reclaim their voice, power, and clarity in one of life's most disorienting transitions. Her clients call her a divorce doula, part strategist, part cheerleader, known for her rare blend of insight, advocacy, and soul deep support. At the heart of her work is this truth: divorce is not just a legal process, but a rite of passage, one that, when held well, returns us to ourselves, not just divorced, but sovereign. I love that. You have a
Thanks,
great
Ellen.
bio. Welcome, Gwendolyn. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be here.
it is great. And I just think it's fun to let people know that we went to high school together.
I know. We went to high school together. I think there was like a brief overlap in college, and then realizing that we landed in the same city for
Like
the
20 years
adult
later.
portion of our lives and like in complementary fields. I think we were both in the environmental field for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and we continue now. We're overlapping and coaching. It's fantastic, and I love getting to know you as an adult. Um, so before we get into the heart of today's conversation, I'd love for listeners to get to know you a little. Can you tell us a time, or no, can you tell us a bit about your own story when you realized this was the work for you, and then what lights you up about it? But first, the story. Yeah.
Yeah, so the story, the divorce story, how did I get to become a divorce coach? Because it's not something that I ever imagined for myself. I didn't know what a divorce coach was until going through divorce myself, and I had worked in, very different fields. And I was in a 2 decades long relationship, and it was a dating relationship that then, about 9 years in became a marital relationship, and we started a family and we moved to Portland. And I, you know, ended up realizing that this wasn't working for me, and it wasn't working for me in some really, really profound ways. Um, but the concept of divorce was agonizing. It was, how do I make the decision to, how can I possibly carry the weight to end this family? I made a vow. I committed myself to this partner, to my married life, to my children. And I just kept coming up against this decision over and over again of like, something's not right here. This is not letting me really become and be the type of mother that I want to be for my kids. And one of the pivotal moments was realizing for myself that I could choose to stay married, but my kids would only ever see, I had become such a shrunken version of myself and I didn't even realize it. When I look back at pictures of me in the thick of kind of divorce hell, I call it, divorce indecision, I am lifeless. I am gray.
Mm.
I have infinitely more wrinkles than I have now, even though that was years ago. There's no light in my eyes, and I just look incredibly sad. And I realized that my kids are only ever getting access to like 10% me, maybe 20% me. They might have me 100% of the time, but I'm not really, I just can't be there. And that if I continue like this, they're never going to know who their mother is. And so when I realized that like the excruciating calculation is actually maybe to separate myself from their dad and to create a haven for me and them where I can be fully myself and fully the mother that I want to be, that made it a really clear decision. And unfortunately, all of that dovetailed with the pandemic. And so I will say it was one of the most difficult periods of my life, of my adult life. And it took many years to get it finalized. And it took, over $100,000 in legal fees. And going through it, I went into it fully informed. I had done years of research. I have found that people come to divorce, they don't come to it overnight. They come to it often years, if not decades, in preparation. And so I knew what to expect. I knew what the process should be on paper, but then walking through it, I was like, this is completely isolating, and I am in the dark, and I don't know up from down. And 50% of marriages end up in divorce. And how is it that the process remains so hidden from us? Um, And I just don't think it needs to be that way. And so when I started getting the call for becoming a divorce coach, because in the meantime, I was finding myself the go-to person for a lot of people who would come to me navigating their own divorces and needing and wanting advice and wanting to hear what they were supposed to do. I decided to step into it fully and to, dive into helping bring education, awareness, and clarity to what is the most turbulent time in our adult lives.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that you say here makes me really think about, well, divorce being quite hidden
Yeah.
and the stories about it, the process for it. Almost because I would expect my expectation or my thought right now about society is that it's a shameful thing. We're supposed to have a perfect life, a perfect marriage, a perfect family. There are still some of these like heavy societal weights of like this 1950s ideal of what family should look like or something. Or maybe there's a false expectation for some people that that's what it is. And so that things don't get opened out because they feel like it's, I don't know, it's been a failure or something. But let's talk a little bit about the reframing that you help do. You've said it's a rite of passage that no one asks for, and it is
Yeah.
often framed as failure. Um, what are some things that led you to see it this way, and what do we miss?
hmm So I think the reframing of divorce as a rite of passage helps us rethink of divorce as an opportunity for accountability and awareness instead of shame and silence. And so when we look at it as, this is this really su supremely transformative return and call to myself. I came to this witnessing other people going through divorce, witnessing myself, and realizing that what I'm actually doing is going through deep personal transformation. And I never would have, none of us choose this. None of us would ever step to the threshold or the plate knowing what's at stake. We would be like, I mean, honestly, hell no. I'm not, the answer is no. So it has to come through, it unfortunately comes through pain. And what it is a calling to return to yourself and to
Hmm.
return to the essence of yourself. And I'm more and more I'm thinking of divorce less as the singular event and the catalyst, and that the catalyst happened actually so many times before. And the catalyst are the all of the moments of dissonance between the you, who you are inside of you, and the life that you're leading. And it's the voice of, my God, is this really it? Is this what my life is like? Is this the type of parent that I stepped up to be in life? Is this the relationship I have with my kids? Is this the relationship I have with the most important person in my life? And it's all those little moments of dissonance that ultimately accumulate into the call for transformation, which we call divorce. Um, and seeing it as a rite of passage, I think we can give ourselves a lot more compassion,
Yeah,
empathy, and we can hold ourselves through it because it actually has a process and it has a pathway. It has a start, middle, and end. It's not this like forever black hole.
I think that's
And
really important to note because it probably, through the isolation of the experience and for how long it can take for people, it can feel like
yeah,
the long dark night, but that there is an outcome. You reminded me here around, and I really love reframing it as a transformative journey on our own personal development experiences if we choose to look at it that way. And I can totally imagine that there may be one partner who is not seeing it that way, who is feeling
yeah,
struggling through the mud, not understanding, refusing to look sort of like within or within the dynamic of the relationship to understand where the faults lie. And sometimes I can imagine that people just change over time and we are no longer the fit for whatever reason.
right.
Remind me, I love when you say coming home to yourself. It's actually a theme I've been working in um,
Mm,
on a totally different topic, but so I won't go into it. But I had an experience in 2010 where I was with my longtime partner, and I was like, I am living completely outside of my center
yeah,
inside of this relationship. And when we talked about it and agreed that we both had done this weird thing where we had twisted ourselves up to become something different for the other person, and we knew we needed to separate, I literally saw an electric spark in the room as if the
yeah,
bond had been broken. It was really
yep,
huge. And this was a long-term dating relationship. Spoiler, we took time apart for 6 months to a year. This is now my husband. But
mhm,
that break caused a deep introspective look to see who we really were and where we're becoming and what choices would we make. I could almost look at it as the second half of our life together.
Yep. Yep.
And that can be the same person or different person. I don't even want to put my story into this, but you just really reminded me of it because I came home to myself in that break and I knew where I needed to stand in order for it to continue. So thank you for really highlighting that. I feel like that's super resonant. Had another question for you. I can imagine, and also having friends who have gone through divorce, there's a lot of chaos before they
Yeah.
can arrive at a moment of clarity. I'm wondering if you can explain or share what you have seen emotionally. What are people really wrestling through as they're trying to fear, right? As they're trying to even give themselves permission to have these thoughts that maybe this is what the next step is.
Yeah, there's so much. I want to I want to speak to a little bit what you said about feeling like the rift and the separation and how um, I hear that mirrored in other people's stories too, where they
Mm.
can feel themselves unwinding from their partner, and so it's like energetically they know that they've had to do something else, and it doesn't always case in point, your story it doesn't always translate to divorce, but it does translate to this really deep knowing that especially I think we especially as women have this intuitive knowing of my gosh, there's so much information that I have within me that's telling me what my truth is. And part of the homecoming is being able to separate yourself from what's happening societally, the relationship advice, all of the stuff. You need better communication, you need this. And in my experience, women, I work with women predominantly, have tried all of the things. And what they really need to do is listen to themselves through this. And so that also speaks to your question about chaos and about fear. Because part of the chaos, I don't know if you've ever heard of the FOG acronym. I think it stands for fear, obligation, guilt.
Yeah.
And when, if you start to tap into yourself somatically and you pay attention to what your brain space becomes in a certain environment, you're like, my gosh, it's always so confusing for me here. Or you're like, why is there no clarity in my relationship? Or why is this like so hard for me? And I literally can't think my way out of it. It's your body's cue to listen to the dissonance that you're experiencing.
Yes.
And it is creating the chaos of I just don't know up from down anymore. And you can stay in that place for a really long time because I think we don't get the validation to exit societally. Like it's so hard. It goes back to the stigmas around divorce. And the fear is real. The fear is really real. And my relationship with fear has changed over time. And instead of understanding fear as a hallmark of what I shouldn't do or what I shouldn't step towards, fear is a teacher and fear is a guide of letting me know, especially, big fear tells me this is you're on the precipice of change. And the magnitude of the fear is indicative of the magnitude of the change that's inviting me forward. And so I faced, I would say big fear 4 times in my life. One of them was making the decision of divorce. And it helped and this is what I offer in coaching too, of is there another time in your life that you can go back to and be like, okay, it was present at this time. What did I do? How did I step through it? And how can I source myself to do it again this time? Um, it is a really tough decision to make.
Yeah. I always say in my own work that fear is also the compass point
Yeah,
directing us in the way to walk.
100%.
And it's so whew, scary to go there. And I love the resourcing that you do in working with somebody to call upon a past experience that they've had
Yeah.
to kind of re-trigger their brain wiring that this is possible.
Yeah.
On the compass point, coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching as a compass, not a fix.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is what you offer, divorce coaching, different than legal advice, legal counsel, things like that?
So divorce coaching is very different. It sits kind of, if you think of a Venn diagram, you have your legal support, you have your therapy, you have your financial support. You might have other professionals in there too. Maybe you have a parenting specialist. And your divorce coach sits in the middle of all of that. And the ways in which a divorce coach is different than any of the other professionals connected to divorce is that divorce coaches are specially trained to help you walk through the chaos of divorce. And divorce impacts 50% of marriages. So statistically, it means, and the majority of adults do get married. So we can just extrapolate that 50% of adults are navigating divorce. And divorce after the loss of a loved one is the most traumatic event that any of us can go through. And so, majority of the adult population, usually between 40 to 60 years old, goes through this and they're going through crisis. I mean, you are going through the death. It's grieving a living death. You're going through the death of the dream of what you thought your life was going to be like, the death of you as a human, the death of your most important relationship, the death of everything you believed about love,
Hmm.
death of how you were going to step forward as a parent, and what you how you feel responsible to your own family and your own community as now this like pillar, this marital pillar, because we do view marriage in this way. And divorce coaching, a divorce coach understands the crisis moment of all of this. And it also understands that divorce is on a timeline. You got like 30 days, 60 days, 100 days to make consequential decisions around your finances, around how you parent, your parenting plan with your kids. You need to sign on the dotted line, and sometimes it's impossible to walk back what your decision is. So a divorce coach helps you, is uniquely trained and able to help you walk through, this emotional crisis when you're often in a state of survival and help you make future-oriented decisions. Often when you don't even, it's not necessarily clear to you what your values are.
Yeah.
A lot of women that I work with, I had a North Star that was really clear for me, and I help women that I work with get to theirs. And often it's about just being really acutely attuned to what they speak about, what they keep bringing into conversation. I'm like, these are your themes. These are the things that are so important to you that you keep speaking them out loud. And so we build decisions based on what's important to them versus reacting in fear or reacting, in a scripted, socialized version of who they thought they needed to be.
I would say even out of a panic moment where you're in a certain kind of mindset or frame of thought that day, and you're like, this is actually what needs to happen with the kids. And then it
Yeah.
explodes everything in that moment, and it doesn't align with this longer term vision because you're having I would imagine there's a lot of acute sympathetic activation happening consistently through the
Yeah.
entire process where our brains aren't online all the time to have that big picture cognitive thinking and solutions finding. So I'm hearing
Right.
you say what I really love about this as a coaching model is that you're so much a space holder and a container and also almost a memory bank when they're not
Mhm.
able to work with it on their own so easily. Because I know if I were in extreme duress or fear or a trauma, which is what all of these things are activating in us when this is a break apart. Um, I would need that mirror to reflect me back to me so I can be reminded of who I am in my darkest moment. And I think that that is so powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because that ends up being the role that I take is being the witness.
Yeah.
And I am being the witness and being the holder of that journey in the mirror. And the number of times that I do, especially obviously when I've been able to work with somebody, upwards of 6 months, and I can see that first moment when they come to me, and sometimes it's in a moment of like, a lot of courage and there's actually joy. They're like, wow, okay, I feel liberated. I'm scared, but I'm liberated.
Yeah.
And then I go back to the rite of passage because I've found that we go through a really similar journey for the
Yeah.
most. Yeah, we have the like agony, we make the decision, and then we're in the state of elated liberation. And for a lot of women, it's like, oh my God, it's like I get to live again. And and then we go through the tunnel of the
The
deepest
valley
dark.
of death, the trough.
Yeah, I call it the ocean of like no light, just bobbing on the ocean.
Yeah.
And you do get to the end of the tunnel, and to have somebody who's like, you came to me holding this energy of liberated joy. Let's carry it through because you know this, to survive any crisis, to survive the deep grief that is transformation, because that is transformation. We are letting go of a version of ourselves. You need the light. You need moments of light and glimmers of light and hope
Yeah.
to carry you through.
You kind of serve as this guidepost who's holding a lantern when they can't hold it themselves, reminding them that it's there. through
Yeah.
the coaching journey. That's amazing. The other thing you said that I wanted to think about, you were talking about grieving the death of the relationship, and I was realizing that. So in my work, when I do intuitive work or if I'm doing a reading, I will often see the relationship as its own being, sometimes as its
Yeah.
own entity, its own life force, separate but connected, of course, to the two people, because there's really a couple of relationships happening, right?
Yeah.
There's the relationship with that person's self, the one with each other, and then the one with the relationship that they've kind of formed. And then
Hmm.
sometimes the dogma and the patterns and everything that are embodied within that life. What's unpacking that like when you're helping someone navigate the grief of not only the unraveling from the other person, but unraveling from the entity that's been with them within the relationship space for so long?
It's an interesting question, because there are some elements of that that I feel are really clear, better suited for the therapeutic space,
Yeah.
where to go through a divorce is a betrayal trauma, and it's not even because the person cheated on you, for instance. It's a betrayal. It's a deeper betrayal trauma because it's an abandonment. You feel abandoned by your beliefs around love and around partnership and lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
So, there's the part of it that's within you, that's within like, oh my God, the relationship with yourself, the relationship with the person who was your number one. And it is important. I think it's really important to identify that when we marry somebody, we have chosen this person to be our number one. And it's really important. You're not born to them, you're not in community with them. You really chose them, especially in Western society, let's say that. And the other part of the betrayal trauma is around everything that you're socialized. It's like everything that you thought life was about, and you can't, sometimes you can see what the cultural script is, but you can't always. And you're like, wow, is there even any love in the universe? Like, is this even a thing? And so, what I have noticed from people is that they will feel like they're like floating, they're untethered.
Yeah.
People describe it like being an astronaut out in space. There's no grounding, there's no, they just don't know what to believe in anymore. Um, so part of my work is in helping be that backbone during those times and the grounding force, um, because you do need to pull apart you. It's my focus is really on helping people come bring their energy back into themselves, and even in those moments of being disconnected, like how do you step back into you? How do you still feel some sense of safety when you don't know what to believe in anymore? And to allow time. You don't unravel. I think I heard a statistic a long time ago that for every year of a relationship, you need to account for at least a month of healing work. And I think that's probably short, frankly, when you're talking about decades-long relationships. Um, and there's one more thing, and I think it slipped my mind that I was going to say, but it's really helping people stay within themselves. Oh, it's the and. Oh, it's bringing in the and. It's not an either or. It's like I have a client whose family is really amazingly supportive, and they're like, you don't even need to ever talk to this person ever again. Like, write him off. Delete all the. Doesn't matter that he's your baby daddy. Just like you never need to talk to him ever again. And she's like yearning to connect with him, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, well, what if you bring the and? What if you realize that your family in this instance, or your friends or whomever, are their role is to be your protectors. And their role is to be like, we don't ever want to see you get hurt again, especially not by this human. But there's another role here, and that there's the you who's like, but I had a relationship with this person. My like emotional self is still connected in the heart space with him. And so can you hold the and and maybe you don't need to act on either one of them. Maybe you shouldn't talk with him or send him a love note. So I kind of help clients hold that complexity and all of the different layers of it without oversimplifying it, because it's not a clear cut way forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, the ability to hold both and
Hmm.
because I find in different work, but similarly, the cognitive dissonance that can occur where I need to choose one or the other and then act on it to be able to fulfill and have like a sense of almost relief from completing the action. It's like compulsion almost out of,
Yeah.
depending on the energetic ties that bind us, just giving us permission to go, and this is still here. can relieve a lot of the tension. Because if we're trying to avoid it, trying to
Yeah.
avoid the and say it's not right, my family and everyone tells me that this is wrong, but why do I still feel this way? I have to ignore it. That part of me is wrong. That's a cutting off of themselves. But by allowing them to have, and I still feel this way, I will not act on it today, perhaps. But I
Yeah.
allow myself to still feel this and to maybe feel some love, even though I know this doesn't work anymore, can relieve a lot of the burden and the pressure and it helps keep them home
Yep.
because they're not cutting off this part that they shouldn't have anymore. So I really, I mean, I just think this speaks really highly to the nuance that you bring in supporting, it sounds like mostly women through this
Hmm.
transitional phase because there's so much work because there's so many parallels to what you're talking about that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what happens for me in regular coaching journeys where it's not
Yeah.
divorce, it's starting a new business or it's working through my boundaries or healing from burnout. It's another form of that in a much more high stakes game. And so to
Yeah.
have a person that is holding a space and is seeing these things to help through all those aspects of transformation is extremely powerful. I mean, like, thank you for doing this work for people. This is amazing.
Yeah. There's something that you said that basically what I'm trying to do, because when is to not perpetuate the trauma of self-abandonment,
Yes.
which we needed to do, we did for 1,000 reasons, like socialization. We thought this, and we just don't even realize that's what we're doing. Like when you're
Right.
20 and 30, you don't, I've come to understand that from a spiritual or personal development, it's not really something that you have the emotional capacity. You're not meant to really tackle that until you're in your 40s. It's just, I'm oversimplifying it, but there's a reason it's in the middle of life. And when start to maybe give too much attention to what somebody else is saying, to things that are external to you, you're continuing that self-abandonment. And again, it's like really deeply coming home to yourself and being like, well, what is the you telling you through this?
Yeah.
And the sovereignty, being able to get back to your sovereign self is paramount.
I love the sovereignty word. And to get back to the sovereign self, liberation and sovereignty, it feels, yeah, like you said, paramount. You're touching on, and you're actually already diving into some aspects of the soul level work on this. And I'm going to ask you really quickly to pause. I have an alarm going off somewhere. I need to go turn it off really quickly. I will be back in just a second. Um, but yeah, you're touching in on this like soul level piece, energy, I mean, like intuition, holding space. Is there anything else around an aspect of soul journey? Because I do feel like not necessarily all coaches would be kind of approaching it always from this perspective. And I think it's a unique and intuitive gift that you have that you're bringing to this practice. And if you have any sort of thoughts on that or things to share.
Yeah, I think I do know that there's some people who approach any sort of coaching, but divorce coaching from like a super practical standpoint, and they're like, we're gonna get your parenting plan and your assets division, your finances squared away. And all of that's really, really important. And I have clients with whom that's like primarily what we focus on, but
Hmm.
it's always informed by what's happening energetically, what's happening underneath the surface.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, so we're going to write a parenting plan, and here's what it says. And it says that, transitions are going to be on Sunday because that's what the precedent was. And they're like, but it's not working for me, but I guess I can bend. I guess I can be like so accommodating, and I can make it work. And the questions I end up asking are like, well, how old are your kids? Can you do this for the next 10 years of their lives? What are the consequences? Are you used to overwhelmingly taking on those consequences? What is the part of you that really needs to claim what you need through this? And how do we do this in a way that respects your ability to thrive and your ability to thrive with your kids? And it's not about, it's the reason I named my company Artemis Divorce Coaching, is it's not about being against or anti your partner or like making life very difficult for them. But often for women, it's about stepping fully into themselves and into the asks and what they need to thrive in life. Um, so it goes a little bit beyond the best practices, and it goes into, how looking at the best practices and what's out there, how do we shape this in a way that's in an integrity with you
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. You're supporting the catalytic transformation of who they can become beyond the nuts and bolts of what needs to happen for this divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I have some practical questions after this whole question. There are different types of divorces, right? There are people who separate amicably, super high stakes, high stress situations where there's a lot of tension and fighting, and ones that feel more ambiguous, like why are we doing it? Oh, we're doing it. We need to do it. Whatever it is, how do you navigate that with clients, and why is it important to kind of understand what that framework is initially? How do you set it up differently for each, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the ambiguity question is a really big one. Most people are in that state of ambiguity of should I stay or should I go for so long. And um, it's one of the spaces I'm looking to kind of move into a little bit more because I think we need more support and not because everybody needs to be divorced, but because you're it's the beginning of asking yourself these like impossible questions and these really, really hard questions. And kind of what, you or others have shared is like sometimes you can come back together and sometimes you can't, or you need to take just like some breathing space apart. Um, and what I was going to say is in that state of ambivalence of being able to be validated, which we don't have societally, like the social narratives and constructs around divorce are you're going to mess up your family, you're going to mess up your kids, like intact family forever, even if the home environment is horrible.
Right.
Which is not, we know better now. Like it's better for kids to be in separate households if parents are, there's always a lot of conflict. Um, and uh, the, so that's a really important phase for people to get more support. And then translating that into the type of divorce that they might have. And it can be surprising what does end up being more conflictual than not. The reason that it matters and what I find is that I tend to attract higher conflict clients.
Mm,
And they come to me and they wouldn't even use that word for a long time, but my ears are attuned. I'm like hearing the places where negotiation's really hard. I'm hearing the places where the conversation cannot advance. And it becomes this like either or setup. Or this place where they're trying to advocate for themselves, but the other person is passing them, they're accusing them of negligence or being like, they've always been the primary parent, but the other parent is like, you don't know what you're doing. And they're like, what do you mean? I've been doing this for like the last 6 years. I think I know what I'm doing. And the strategically, it matters because how you shape a parenting plan, how you go through the negotiations, how you think about your finances is different. If you're in partnership with somebody who can have dialogue, who is able to do some give and take, the stakes are a little bit lower. Like
yeah.
maybe you don't have to decide everything today, but if
Mhm.
you're with somebody with whom it's excruciating and it's impossible and it like a one line request of can you please give me the kids' jackets becomes a Bible of content. Um, you typically want to have negotiations that are set up for the next 10 years of life. And that's like, think about how hard, can you imagine what you're going to need 10 years from now?
No,
So,
I have a hard time visualizing 2 years from now every now and then. Yeah.
so that's where having some strategy behind what type of divorce you're going through, really matters. And then, to draw from my work before becoming a divorce coach of talking about social issues and our, really pressing issues around sexism and racism, it's understanding the caveats of the legal system and the judicial system and, the stigma around moms and how that perpetuates and through a divorce and how you need to present yourself to the legal system so that you're taken with credibility and care and not just dismissed. So there's a lot of strategy behind this work.
There are a couple more questions I have about ultimately, and I can just imagine that there are a couple people listening today who are in this position of uncertainty, probably, or
Yeah.
maybe they're a little bit in the thick of it and realizing, wow, it would be really nice to have someone to kind of co-navigate.
Mhm.
So let's talk, and I'm thinking about like as we're talking, like we're talking to that audience and to those people who are in some pain right now and who want to know not only are you there to help them get to the other side, but what does what does quote unquote success? What does success look like for the other side? What's a little guiding light that they can look at if they're trying to think about this right now?
Yeah, so it can be really scary to think about divorce and you're like, oh my God, is the grass greener on the other side? Am I just going to become like, this and to use a stereotype like this wrinkled cougar who's trying to go after young men because there are no men my age anymore and um is this the best it's going to be and I'm about to throw it out the window. And I find that perspective is the perspective of somebody who hasn't gone through transformation. They don't know yet. So they're still looking at it through society's lens and they're like judging themselves on that. They're like, wow, this is the best that I'm going to get because divorced women, especially like, oh my God, they're a special breed and nobody wants to become them. And when you end up in a community of people who've been through divorce, what you find is that there is so much humility and there's so much humor and there's such depth. And there is this like well of emotional attunement, awareness, language. And they have gone through, there isn't a single person when I tell them I'm a divorce coach, they don't tell me their divorce story and they don't tell me like how devastating and excruciating it was. Um, and yet they're so much better off for it because they got to return to themselves. And maybe that means that they stepped into a career or a passion that they never could have imagined. They become a photographer or a hypnotist. Or maybe they didn't actually end up divorcing, but their marriage changed for the better. And their relationship with their children changed. They are so much more present and they've come to really rely and understand what makes life count. It's not by the external measures of success anymore. It's not so much like, oh, well, I have, $1 million in the bank. It's I am rich in the quality of my relationships in my community and the connection that I have for my children. And for a lot of dads, what I see sometimes is they're actually stepping into their children's lives in ways that they didn't do so much when they were married for all of the reasons. And that's a huge benefit for kids to have like that more of a bonded relationship with their fathers. And for moms, they get to be more fully themselves. They're going out dancing with their friends. They're going to go take that trip. They're pursuing the pottery class. They're just more rested.
Yeah.
So you don't get to it without the fire of transformation. And I think you know that. But the flip side, it's not so much like, is divorce better than what I have now? The real question is, can you survive what you have now? Or is what you have now going to kill you? Is it going to make you so bitter that you're not even going to like yourself or so full of resentment? Um,
Well, and I think about, does that bitterness then breed autoimmune issues? Do we become sick because of the bitterness? Do we then lose our health and our vitality even further because we're not operating in a way that our body would like us to be free?
yep.
Yeah.
And I have found a pattern that people, the ones who make the decision to divorce, and again, it's overwhelmingly women,
Hmm.
they come to it because they get to a moment of existential death. They're like, if I either
Mm.
choose this decision, which is like jumping off a cliff, or I stay here, which is like, entombing myself.
Yeah.
And um and at that point, when you're on that precipice, you make the big decision. If I may, can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that we as a society and as kind of friends or loved ones who are watching our people get divorced, what we tend to not know is how much they need us and how much they just need us to show up and to, not project our own stereotypes on them of, well, God, something must be wrong with you if you can't keep your marriage together, or damn, this mom seems really excited, to have some time to herself. Like, does she not love her kids enough? Or, all of the things that we project or like, oh, you're getting divorced, you'll find another man, no big deal. And then we judge who they're dating. And or I would say the more painful part is for kids, grown children who are going through this and who are looking for their support networks. They need their parents. Like one of the biggest heartbreaks that I see are people who are going through divorce and they are so desperate for the security and the comfort that only like a parental figure can give them. And their parents, often it's because they haven't been through it themselves or they just don't have that emotional depth. Just turn away.
Oh, the
And
parents of the adults who are getting divorced, so would be grandparents of the kids. That's what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
and not out of meanness. They don't show up. They don't call. Their kids are like, "Hey, I need you. Can you come help me move out of my house? Can you just come for the weekend?" And they're like, "Nah, it's not convenient." And it's kind of like, but this is a time when your child needs you to show up and you're emotionally. They just need your
Mhm.
emotional presence. So I would say as community members, if we could just have more compassion for people going through divorce,
Yeah.
it would be huge.
Yeah. Thank you. And what would I can imagine also that a person in the situation might be reticent to ask for help beyond close
Mm.
family,
Yeah.
whether or not they receive it. But what would be some of the encouragement you would offer to a person going through it? Perhaps their community does not know how to show up, doesn't know what to do. Sometimes is uncertain. Am I intruding? Do they just need some space?
Yeah.
How do I ask for help? How would you encourage someone going through this to seek help and what to ask for? What would be the script? They might even need a script.
I think it's twofold. One is, how do you ask for people who are going to stay in your life, like say close friends, family members? And one of the scripts that I've seen work is, you may not understand this. I don't even understand it. I just need you to show up for me. I just sometimes need you to be by my side. You don't have to say anything. Just be there. And the other part for people going through divorce is that you actually do need to recreate your community. And you do need to go get an additional friend group and invite in other activities and start to seek out people who've been through this and who are divorced. And part of it is that whether we like it or not, again, more as divorced women, because I think women have that. There's like this double bind of, to have a single adult woman who's divorced is really threatening. It's really threatening for married women. And it's also really, it's like walking around with the capital A, the scarlet A, except it's the
Yeah,
D. And so even for your married friends, sometimes you become this inadvertent mirror of their fears, like all of their fears around what could go wrong with their marriage or the demise of their relationship. So it's you need an additional community to help ground you in your transformation.
absolutely. Yeah, because it's part of that transformative process that my previous friend group may not be at a point where they know that this isn't about them and it's
Yeah.
actually about what I'm going through, but they can't see that because they're scared because they may be going through many things that they're trying to keep under the rug in some cases, or just not know how to show up because they feel like, why would I rub my happy marriage in your life right now?
Yeah.
Or something like that. You need people to ground with. That's great. Thinking about, I think there's a question I have about kids and like
Yeah.
support for kids, children of the young kids, right? Not the adult children not getting it from their parents, but the kids who are experiencing their parents splitting. And given
Yeah.
that there are so many types of separation, what are some things when parents' largest fear is separation and the impact on the children that they can be thinking through to sort of scaffold that transition, which will inevitably be stressful, but to give them a softer landing?
It's an interesting question. I've seen some people who, enter into separation with so much foresight and so much care for their kids, and it's like months of preparation, and so even scripting the conversation. How are they going to tell their child? Um, and and it's amazing. And then getting the therapeutic support. Sometimes at young ages, it's often play therapy or letting teachers know and saying, "Hey, this is happening. Just FYI, if there's a big outburst." Um, and what can sometimes feel like almost I don't know, kind of it's a little bit unfortunate because it's like there's so much care in these circumstances, but kids are going through a transformation too. And so it's not like the perfectly delivered, hey, mom and dad are splitting up conversation. It's how do you continue to hold them through the unraveling of their foundation? And what I found, because I'm now multiple years into mine and also watching other people, and my parents also divorced when I was actually an adult, which is a whole interesting thing to go through, is I think
Mine did
you
as
understand
well. So,
well.
yeah. Yeah.
Is it doesn't end. The transformation and what that means doesn't end when you're a society that so heavily prioritizes and values like the intact family. And I found that my kids will end up bonding with other kids who've gone through divorce so
Mm.
they understand each other. And obviously there's the other end of the spectrum of people who do this with little care or where there's so much trauma and reactivity that it's like the kids are now swept up into it, and have their own fears. And so as much as possible, it's getting the additional support, professional support. And if therapy isn't their thing, how else can they get their energy out? Maybe it's a sport, maybe it's art, maybe it's friends. Um, One of the things that has been really helpful for me is to have a relationship with my kids' therapist, independent of if my kids go to her or not. So she knows them, and I'm able to bring issues up to her and say, "Hey, this happened. How can I best parent through this?"
Mm.
Uh, because there's also very little. We're still figuring out this whole like parenting through divorce thing. Like you know, we're what, 2 generations into it, not even. So there's a lot for us to learn. And holding your kids with a lot of care. Um, there's a lot of advice out there that says that kids are the most reactive with their safe parent, which if you're the safe parent, you're like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. How do I not spin into my own triggered response with my kids'
Yeah.
response? Um, so last thing is again the community, having that like community of parents who's going through it too, who can commiserate with you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I can imagine not because of divorce, but being the safe parent and having to be the nervous system regulator for really intense feelings and even outbursts of where they're so angry that they're throwing it at you. And I could
100%.
imagine the guilt that would come. I hate you. You did this. Why did you put me in this situation? And it's really them
Yeah.
processing and in that moment likely feeling that exact thing. But then as the adult, as the parent, to sit and know my job right now is to just hold the container for this energy so that this person who's very afraid of me leaving also or something knows that I'm always here.
Yeah.
They can be mad at me and they can throw their anger, but I'm not going anywhere. That that is a mechanism I have leaned on so much in
Yep.
parenting intensely emotional kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really important one, and in the process, you're teaching them a different version of what attachment and love can look like, which, I think all of us who are willing to who go through divorce in some ways are kind of like, I'm hoping to break a cycle too. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that my kids go into like a marital relationship or something similar, with better tools to navigate this. Um, but there's something that you said about like being able to be the nervous system regulator. That's really important. But it also made me think about the grief work and how the grieving our marriages or the end of a long relationship takes a really long time.
Yeah.
And it taps into a whole other tapestry of grief work that we need to do, that goes back to our own childhoods. So one of the things I've learned about trauma for myself is that it presents itself when it's ready.
Yeah.
Um, and that can take a lot of years, and it's okay.
It is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a final kind of closing out question, and it goes a little bit back to the person who's listening right now, who's going, "Wow, I didn't know I needed to hear this today." What advice would you give them in this moment?
I would tell them, I would hope that I'm picturing them sitting, hopefully seated and like maybe touching their chest or their heart space. And in some ways, just receiving that part of themselves that needed that validation of like, yes, what you have been experiencing is real and it is true and it is legit. And you are not a bad person and they are not a bad person. And you deserve to be deeply held. And you
Mm.
deserve to be deeply held as who you are, who you're becoming, how you're becoming. Um, and this is really hard work and it hurts. And there are supports out there. And we're not meant to walk through life in isolation and alone. And there is a way to walk through this transformation with more guidance and a little bit more of a container around what to expect, when to expect it, and how to anticipate it. Not because you won't feel it, not because it's not gonna, kick you in the butt, but because you deserve that compassion and that witnessing.
You almost moved me to tears with that. I think everyone needs to hear that regardless. But yes, to that person, if you are one of the people listening right now who has been deeply moved by this conversation, I hope you hear those words that Gwendolyn just shared. And Gwendolyn, how can people find you if they would like
Yeah.
to have a
So
conversation? Yeah.
the best place is my website. It's Artemis Divorce Coaching, and I think you're going to have that in the show notes
Yeah, I'll put
probably.
it in the notes.
So Artemis, like the Greek goddess, she's the protectress of women and children, which was also intentional, and I've loved her since I was a teenager. And divorce and then coaching, and you can email me too, Gwendolyn at artemisdivorcecoaching.com. And I'm on all the social channels, so follow, reach out, schedule a consultation, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll be there. And my honor and my what I get out of this is the ability to be the type of witness that I know that I am. And as somebody in parallel space talked to me, or we were talking about, is like not everybody is meant to work in the shadows of life. And I've never been deterred by that, and I've never been deterred by the magnitude of someone's pain. And instead, it's um, being invited into that space of transformation is such a gift.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.